Identity governance for Entra-First environments. If your organization has standardized on Microsoft Entra ID, you've made a sound architectural decision. Entra is a powerful identity platform widely adopted, deeply integrated with Microsoft workloads, and genuinely effective at controlling who can authenticate and when. But here's something many Entra-First organizations discover after the deployment is done. Strong identity control and strong identity governance are not the same thing. And the gap between them is where access risk quietly accumulates. Governance that works alongside the identity foundation you already rely on. What Entra does well. Microsoft Entra ID has evolved significantly beyond its origins as Active Directory in the cloud. It is now the identity backbone for a large and growing number of enterprise organizations, and for good reason. It handles authentication reliably, enforces conditional access policies, supports single sign-on across Microsoft and third-party applications, and integrates natively with the tools most organizations already depend on. For questions like, can this user authenticate right now? Should access be permitted under current conditions? Does this login require step-up verification? Entra answers them well. It is a strong, proven system of record for identity control, and organizations that have built their access architecture around it have generally made the right call. The challenges that arise in Entra-First environments aren't a reflection of what Entra gets wrong. They're a reflection of what governance requires that goes beyond what any identity provider is designed to do. The governance gap. Identity control and identity governance are related, but they operate on different questions. Entra is built to answer questions in real time. Is this user who they say they are? Should this access be permitted right now? What conditions apply to this session? These are enforcement questions, and Entra answers them well. Governance asks a different set of questions, ones that play out over time rather than in the moment. Should this user still have this access, given everything that's changed since it was granted? Who is accountable for having approved it? When was it last meaningfully reviewed? And when a decision was made to revoke access, can we prove it actually happened? These questions sit around Entra, not inside it. They require a different kind of infrastructure, one focused on decision quality, accountability, and verified outcomes, rather than real-time enforcement. Where the gap becomes visible. The gap tends to become most visible as identity extends beyond Microsoft workloads. Within the Microsoft ecosystem, Entra provides reasonable visibility. But most enterprise environments also include non-Microsoft SaaS applications, legacy platforms, custom-built systems, and on-premises infrastructure. And as access expands across those systems, governance complexity grows sharply. Ownership becomes harder to track. Lifecycle events stop flowing cleanly. Audit evidence starts to fragment across Entra, ITSM systems, and individual application logs. And the further identity moves outside the Microsoft perimeter, the harder it becomes to coordinate and prove governance outcomes. Where governance pressure shows up. Access reviews are usually the first place governance pressure becomes tangible in Entra-First environments. Entra can show you who has access to what, but it doesn't tell reviewers whether that access still makes sense, who in the business is responsible for it, or what the risk implications are if it stays. Reviewers are handed long entitlement lists with technical role names and asked to certify access they often don't have enough context to evaluate meaningfully. Under those conditions, reviews tend to run late, decisions get rubber-stamped, and remediation when access is flagged for removal often doesn't get verified. The audit problem. Who has access? Why do they have it? When was it last reviewed? Was the decision enforced? Auditors don't evaluate identity platforms. They evaluate outcomes. And even in a well-run Entra environment, meeting audit expectations requires demonstrating not just that access was reviewed, but that decisions were made with accountability and that revocations were actually carried out. Without governance controls that sit above the identity provider, assembling that evidence tends to become a manual, fragmented process. one that consumes significant time and still leaves gaps that auditors can question. Governance as a complementary layer. For Entra-First organizations, strengthening governance doesn't mean rethinking your identity architecture. Entra stays exactly where it is, the system of record for authentication, access control, and enforcement. What changes is the layer that sits around it. Effective governance for Entra-First environments consumes identity and access data from Entra and the other systems connected to it, applies consistent review and approval models across applications, regardless of where they sit, tracks accountability, so it's clear who made which decisions and when, verifies that revocations were actually carried out rather than assuming they were, and produces audit-ready evidence that reflects what genuinely happened, not what was intended. Starting where risk is highest. Successful Entra-First organizations rarely try to fix governance everywhere at once. The most effective starting point is high risk and regulated access. The accounts and entitlements where governance gaps create the most exposure. From there, coverage expands incrementally, decision quality improves before frequency increases, and remediation loops get closed before the scope grows. That approach allows governance maturity to develop without disrupting the access infrastructure that's already working. Microsoft Entra ID gives you a strong identity foundation. It was the right choice, and it stays in place. What governance adds is the oversight layer that makes sure access remains appropriate, justified, and verifiable as your organization changes, especially as identity extends beyond Microsoft services. If your Entra environment is running well, but governance still feels difficult, reviews stalling, audit preparation taking longer than it should, excess access accumulating across non-Microsoft systems, that's the gap governance is designed to close. Talk to an OpenIAM identity governance expert to see how governance works alongside Entra in practice, or download a free trial to explore it in your own environment. Links are in the description.